And speaking of issues, this season, a lot of people are complaining about these new foul calls, particularly our main adversaries in the Brooklyn Nets, aka James Harden, and the Atlanta Hawks, aka Trae Young. Last season, coming off that bubble, was one of the most epic years ever in the NBA as far as scoring. There were teams that even had losing records that just had epic numbers and just overall scoring. And it seems like the league had kind of dialed that back a bit with these new rule changes, and it's affecting a few different teams and players. First of all, in the first, I would say 10 games of this season so far, the league has had some of the fewest free throw attempts per game in the modern era. Also, the league has had the lowest offensive efficiency since 2014. And if you remember, around 2014, 2015, that's when they kind of dialed the rules up a bit to kind of favor that three-point shooting that we've seen the Warriors take advantage of. So ever since before those rule changes, the league has kind of reverted back to those days. And speaking of the earlier low scoring days, the league overall, the field goal percentages have returned to like early 2000s level, which is crazy. And the Miami Heat, they're holding opponents to like 85 points per game. So things have pretty much been dialed back a bit. And if you look at guys who took advantage of the old rules and that were flourishing, guys like Trae Young, James Harden, and Stephen Curry, all their scoring averages are down about 3 points per game this season. Now, even though Trae Young is a main adversary for the Knicks, and the rules have affected him this season, but he overall still has a very deep squad that he's playing with, so he has other guys to help him. But mainly, these rules have really affected James Harden and the Brooklyn Nets most of all. And that's really what I want to focus on here, because the dynamic with the Brooklyn Nets, especially being a main adversary of the Knicks, it's very unique. Well, for starters, with Kyrie out of the lineup, James Harden is asked to do more. So he's no longer hiding on cruise control as he did last season by just playing the point guard role, I'm the third string guy trying to get you guys going. He can no longer hide behind that gray area, and now he's actually pushed to the forefront. Not only his game is pushed to the forefront, also him being in the spotlight of the New York City media, which in its own is going to be a very unique circumstance, as James Harden is a guy who does not like criticism and does not perform well under pressure.
I'm confused. I'm confused right now.
Yes, this definitely does throw off the media with James Harden's game, especially due to the fact that in the first 5 Nets games, he only attempted 15 free throws, when in the old days, when he was playing in Houston, he would attempt about 15 to 19 free throws per game. And keep in mind, that was in the Western Conference, where every night teams go pretty much run and gun, and James was playing against teams who normally don't play defense. Teams like the younger Phoenix Suns, the Sacramento the Kings, the Portland Trailblazers with Dame, they definitely play no defense. The OKC Thunder, the Pelicans, the Memphis Grizzlies, the younger Lakers, they were going up against teams once again that just try to either imitate Golden State or just failed at imitating Golden State when it comes to that run and gun, fast-paced style. So keep in mind, this is James Harden playing in the faster-paced Western Conference. Now James Harden is in the Eastern Conference, and this is something that the media has never ever taken into consideration, especially with these new rule changes, is that James Harden now finds himself in the Eastern Conference with new rule changes, with less foul calls, and which is a bump and grind conference, slower pace, bump and grind, defensive oriented conference. If you look at the top of our conference, you got teams like the Miami Heat, the Philadelphia 76ers, the Milwaukee Bucks. Those teams all slow the pace down and they play lock-up defense. And for the most part, in the last like 10 to 20 years, the Eastern Conference has pretty much been a bump and grind, slow the pace down type of conference. So this is where James Harden finds himself in a unique predicament right now. And just the overall style of play between both conferences, this is something that has to be taken into consideration of why he's performing the way he is. And just understand, my fellow Knicks fans, why am I mentioning these things? Because the Brooklyn Nets this season are operating with a few chinks in their armor. I know they've spent a lot of money and they're building their super team and they want a guaranteed championship, hoping to buy one, but that's just not how it works. And this Kyrie Irving situation has opened up a lot of holes with this team. And keep in mind, this is a small unit team They don't really have centers like that. They got LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin down low, and they were supposed to be really top heavy with Kyrie, James Harden, and Kevin Durant to outscore teams even if they play sloppy defense. So now they kind of have one of their superstars kind of have something that kind of added a positive to his game kind of taken away. And at the same time, he does have issues performing with media pressure. Remember how Kevin Durant went on the radio, said the Knicks weren't relevant, that the Brooklyn Nets were low-key and quiet. Now, right now, without Kyrie, things for James Harden is not going to be low-key and quiet. He is going to be an eye that the New York City media will be looking at. And with that added pressure, we'll see if he even gets to a point where he wants to renew his contract, because he's not even guaranteed to be on this team that long. And just looking at the past, we've seen James Harden, while being under pressure, he checks out pretty quick. So once again, these rule changes have had a different effect on Trae Young and James Harden. Trae Young at least is still protected by having a deep roster. Now, James Harden performing in a very top-heavy team, without Kyrie, a lot of the pressure is going to fall on him to keep up and perform with KD to lift the rest of this team up and to make up for the difference that Kyrie can't provide while not being there. And for James Harden to not get these foul calls and to also be performing in a very physical bump and grind Eastern Conference with the Milwaukee Bucks, Miami Heat, even the Knicks playing top-level defense at times, and the Philadelphia 76ers, all these dynamics may create an issue for James Harden going forward. So to my fellow Knicks fans, even though the Brooklyn Nets have sort of built a super team and spent the money to have a super team, things are not so black and white going up against us this season, especially with the deep roster that we have.